What's going on, guys? Welcome to mikeybalzz Fishing. You guys really enjoyed when we did our rod arsenal walkthrough, but guess what? It's been a while. So it's about time to kind of like update that. We're going into all these cold weather, kind of winter fishing months, and then just ahead of that is spring epic bass fishing. But I got all these new setups. I got some actually new rods that I want to show you, and they're actually perfect for some of these cold weather techniques. So come with me. We're going to do a little rod arsenal walkthrough. Stay tuned. So I know I said cold winter weather. Well, this is one of the things I love about Alabama is it is cold winter weather, but every once in a while you get a beautiful freaking day like this when you can put on a hat and just hang out. But we're gonna keep this pretty simple. I'm gonna run through, on my right side, I have more of my reaction style rods that I'm using. On my left side, I have my slightly finesse or just like a little more kind of nuanced presentations. So I'm gonna go through them one by one. I'll put links to them all in the description box below. But let's get started and get started with a workhorse. This one's really simple. This is a 7-foot medium heavy Halo TI. You guys saw this in some of the earlier videos. I'm actually really fired up. I hope I put this video up, but the multi-blade spinnerbait, D&M Custom Baits, this thing is absolutely sick. But it's a 7-foot medium heavy. It is an absolute utility rod. I will use this rod for throwing a spinnerbait, for throwing a trap, and I'll also even throw like a football jig, like a 1/2 ounce, a 3/4 ounce football jig on it. It's so versatile. Even when we get into spring, I'll be putting like a stick bait with a 1/4 ounce on here and dragging it through some of that early grass that comes up. But that's what I like about this 7-foot is I can do anything with it, dude. Whether it's reaction style, whether it's drag baits, it's a perfect setup. Even if I want to fish like a frog on braid, on a little lighter braid, maybe a little bit sparser cover, perfect setup. The next one, I actually don't even have a reel on this one yet because I just got it. This is a Hallo Black Widow 7'3" medium heavy. So it's a lot like the utility rod that we talked about, but it's a hair longer. It has a slightly more moderate taper. That TI that I showed you, it has a super fast, extra fast tip, which means it just bends at the tip a little. This one has a little more bend kind of throughout the rod. What I'm really fired up to use this one for is kind of that mid-range swim baiting, whether it's like putting on a 1/2 ounce, maybe a 3/8 ounce kind of, you know, the goat swim bait heads, and just putting a straight swim bait on there. Gambler Big Easy, Hollow Body, Kitech, you know, just for slow reeling, but something where I want like a little more beef, but that 7'3" gives me the ability to make nice long casts. The other thing I'm kind of fired up to do with this thing is to rip a chatterbait with it, especially like a 1/2 ounce or a slightly heavier chatterbait. It's perfect for making those long casts, and it's really easy to pick up line, especially I'm planning on putting like a 7.21 reel on here. It's pretty fast, not super duper fast, but I can rip that bait out of the grass, use that rod tip, and then use that reel to pick up the line. Let's see here. Well, you know, dude, I would be remiss, and you guys can Google that word, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention when I got my A-rig on. This has really been something that I like doing, and it's a little bit different than what most people do. I put this A-rig on a little shorter rod. This is only, I think it's the 7.2. Let me double check. I'm 90% sure this thing is a 7.2 heavy. It's a rave, a Halo rave. And this is, dude, this is real fishing, right? This is a lower end rod. You know, it's not super expensive. It's a budget price point rod. But what I really like about this thing is it has that moderate taper. And I really believe with an A-rig, it's almost like fishing a giant crankbait. You really want that rod to kind of load up, because oftentimes you don't even feel like a bump. I mean, when they're really smashing it, no doubt you do, but it's more of a weight thing. It's almost like a jig fishing or something like that, where they load up on these swim baits, and all you want the rod to do is load up and sweep. You're not really like reeling down and setting the hook or anything like that. And this 7.2 does one other thing that I think is super important. You guys probably see we're on like a little point right behind us. Well, there's like some logs coming off that point, but it drops into like 7-8 feet of water. Well, I want to be able to make targeted casts to wherever those logs are laying in the water. If I see a stump, maybe I see a little grass bed coming up, or if I'm, say, on Smith Lake or something along those lines when we got a bunch of docks and I want to throw that A-rig to those docks and I want to keep it tight to it. I've really found that using this shorter rod, 7.2, I'll even play around with my 7.3 daylight, but anything above that, when you start getting into a 7.6, 7.9, great for open water fishing and throwing like a gigantic rig, but these slightly more compact rigs around cover, around docks, dude, it makes it so much easier to target the bait. Other thing, so many things to talk about. You know, an A-rig is a very exhausting thing to throw. It really takes a toll on you. Using a little smaller, lighter, more compact rod, you might not always get the casting distance that you're gonna get with that longer rod, but you can throw the thing all day long. Let's see what else we got right here. You know what, since we're talking about it, let's talk about my favorite rod. And this is literally still my favorite rod. We did a rod walkthrough quite a while ago. This is a 7-foot medium Halo TI. This thing is awesome. Dude, I can do so much with it. It is a little bit lighter, softer rod, but it is perfect for my magnet. Dude, like unbelievably perfect when they start pushing out to those ledges or get on those first breaks. Also even for throwing like small finesse jigs. We've talked about some of those jigs, those ball head jigs that I'm making. If I'm throwing a 1/4 ounce, 3/8, even sometimes the half, dude, the tip on this thing, the sensitivity, it's freaking awesome. And it's got, I don't even know how to explain it. The tip is just, like, to me, it's the perfect tip. Everybody's different with rods, but to me, it's the perfect tip for making a lot of like roll cast and like shot cast, you know, and it just has that perfect sensitivity for whether I'm dragging or I got like an underspin mod right here. I think this is from Hog Farmer, but I'll also throw even like an underspin on it, dude. It just has that right tip to kind of feel something moving, whether it's a blade, whether you're walking like a little ball head over the rocks or even that Ned head kind of like through sparse grass. But at the same time, it's got enough backbone to actually pull them through and kind of manage, you know, I don't know, like a 5-6 pound fish. But this is one of my favorite rods, actually probably my favorite rod, 7-foot medium Halo TI. Let's talk some more new stuff, because new stuff is cool stuff. So right down here, all jacked up and locked into my Kryptonite, I have another Black Widow. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I love, and the fish love, that's a big thing too, throwing a DT6, throwing a jerkbait, throwing square bills, throwing medium diving crankbaits, especially in these colder weather months, it is a go-to, dude. That reaction style, those fish seem to be in that 8 to like 2 foot kind of water, and especially when it comes to like bluff breaks or like rock kind of like taper points and that, you almost cannot beat like a shallow to medium diving, kind of like a flat-sided crankbait or something like that. Well, this is a 7-foot medium cranking rod. This is the Black Widow, and dude, medium cranking, it's not fiberglass. I'm not a fan of fiberglass, dude. I think it's too wonky, and when we're talking about those rocks or maybe trying to hit like a little shell bed, you don't get the transmission from a glass rod. Granted, you're almost always gonna land fish on a crankbait on a glass rod. That's one of the beauties of it, but it is a lot harder to cast, and I don't think you feel the bottom enough, because I wanna know when my crankbait's like bouncing off of a rock or something like that, because that's usually when the fish bite. But what's nice about this is graphite, but it has a super moderate bend. The other thing though too is, since it is graphite, you don't get that whoopy cast. You still get like a little bit moderate bend when you're casting, but you can be a lot more accurate with this. I found with a 7-foot glass rod, I used to have this old Browning glass rod, dude, like trying to make like a precise cast, say like we're talking about the wood behind us again, it's next to impossible. So this gives you enough castability and literally the perfect action. I caught like a freaking 4.5 pound smallie on this thing that took me to school, and the rod just ate her up, dude. Just bending, good flex. It's a fun rod to fish, and I love fishing crankbaits. So if you guys are into fishing kind of medium to shallow running crankbaits, check this thing out. It's a 7-foot medium, but make sure that you note it's the crankbait series of the Black Widow. Absolutely sick rod, dude. I love this thing. And actually a note too, the reel that I'll put on this, I'll run a 621. I actually have 2 of these, both with 621s on them. I find that's a better reel for whether I'm jerkbait fishing, you know, crankbait fishing. It slows me down a little and makes sure that the action on this thing, it isn't like side swiping, it's running straight and true. So let's look at, what else do we got hiding down here? This guy right here, this is the Kryptonite, Halo Kryptonite. I think it's a 7.2 medium heavy. Absolutely sick chatterbait rod. Absolutely sick, dude. Like it has this perfect tip that's a little bit faster than our crankbait rod that we were talking about. It's not nearly as moderate, but it's also a little bit slower than my TI series. So it's got just the right kind of I don't know, just the right wonk to it, to be able to rip the bait off the grass, which is hugely important, whether it's grass or even if you're just stroking it like on the bottom to kind of get that reaction strike. But it's got enough tip so that when those fish come up, so you stroke it up, the fish come up and the rod like needs to load up, it's not just loading up right in the tip, because that's how you miss fish a ton. Like it'll load up in the tip, you'll try to like pull back and you don't have enough rod left to actually like put it to them. With this, it's going to load up a little further down the rod, and when they're biting it, especially when you're ripping it or stroking that chatterbait out, dude, it's perfect. Absolutely perfect. I love this thing. In contrast to a lot of my other reaction style baits, like hard baits, I do run like a higher speed reel on this. This is a 721, and this is one of my heavier like line rods. Most of these rods are going to be like 12-pound fluorocarbon, 15-pound fluorocarbon. This joker, it's 18. I'll even put 20 on it because I'm usually throwing it around cover, or if I'm picking up a chatterbait, most of the time the water's got some stain in it, so I'm comfortable with, you know, a little bit heavier line. Also a great rod for a spinnerbait as well. Let's see, what else do we got hiding down here? Actually, just to kind of re-note, this is another 7-foot medium heavy TI. Got my trap on it. Just a workhorse rod, multi-dimensional, and that's really important to me with these rods. Let me show you one last rod here on my reaction baits, and I want to show you a bait that's super cool with it, because I don't see many people rigging this thing like this. So this is actually a Gambler Minnow. It's an underspin, and I've taken a Gambler shaky shad. It's actually a drop shot bait, dude, and I've put it on there. Now the rod that I'm putting it on, I'll either throw it on that 7-foot medium TI that we talked about, or this is a 7'3" daylight medium action. It's a little bit softer. I find this is perfect if, like, say I'm on Smith Lake and I want to throw the underspin and I'm making like super long casts and I'm just like straight reeling kind of deal. Or if I want to put like a little jigging spoon on, I got it set up with 12-pound test, super kind of lightweight stuff, but perfect for those smaller reaction stuff. Say I pick up like a little 2.8 Kitech or like a little teasy and put it on a 1/4 ounce head and I want to throw it on a bait caster, this is my guy. I get long casts. It has a slightly more moderate tip to it, just like that. So I can basically let it load up when you're getting a bite, because on these kinds of guys, they don't slam it like they would a trap. Usually it's just kind of like weight and a hold. Perfect rod for it though. I absolutely love this thing, and I will throw actually small traps on this, little 1/4 ounce traps and things like that. So we've talked about a lot of reaction baits. I'm gonna slide over to this pile right here. Now I said these aren't reaction, they're more finesse. Now some of them are reaction style, but I look at them as a little more nuanced. And probably one of the best examples of those kinds of baits is this guy right here. And this is a new rod that I'm super fired up about. So I've got my Megabass Vision 110. Awesome jerkbait. We've talked about it in the past. I like throwing a jerkbait on a slightly shorter rod. This is a Black Widow 610 medium. Now it's not a cranking rod, so it actually does have a fairly fast tip, not too fast though, because it's medium. But what it allows me to do is I can make precision casts. We were talking about Smith Lake and the docks. I want to be able to throw this jerkbait like on the corner or the back inside like turn of a dock. I want to be able to make accurate casts. Also, when they start schooling, I want to be able to hit them right on the head, because on Smith, dude, they'll be here and then they'll be 100 yards down, dude. You have to have that cast right on them with that jerkbait or that top water super fast. But super sweet rod, 610 medium. This is my jerkbait rod. Whether I'm throwing a soft jerkbait, hard jerkbait, I got 12-pound fluorocarbon on here. This is a 621 reel. It's freaking awesome for it, dude. Like, the other thing that I found too, I don't know if you guys have this experience, when you're like going down and jerking with a jerkbait, oftentimes the rod tip, I'm not super tall, will be hitting the water. That's why I like the 610 too, is because it stays up from the water. I can walk, jerk, whatever, and I'm not like smacking the boat and I'm not smacking the water all the time. So 610 Black Widow medium, that's my jerkbait rod. And we're gonna use the word again, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about this guy. Not only does it have a net on it, which I absolutely love, but this is a 7-foot medium Halo TI spinning rod. So we're not there yet, and they're probably not gonna be biting plastic super hardcore for the next like month, maybe month and a half. But dude, when they do, they're gonna start moving up onto these shallow banks, and everybody's gonna be throwing big chatterbaits, big lunky, and I'm gonna throw some big swim baits at them, no doubt about it. But one thing, dude, when Gunnersville especially is getting beat up and every bank has a boat on it, I'll pick up one of these on this rod with 8-pound fluorocarbon and 14-pound braid leader, I got it all inverted, 14-pound braid to 8-pound leader. And I'll throw it exactly where these guys are throwing spinner baits, traps, chatterbaits. And I'll fish it so slow then I want to kill myself, which is pretty sad. You never want to do that. But I'll fish it super duper slow, and dude, you catch some giants. Like accidentally you might like trip across a bed, or you catch some fish. Like a lot of time you get cruisers in the spring that just go back and forth, and freaking you can't catch them on anything. You'll see them down there fishing super slow with a Ned. This is the rod, 7-foot medium TI. What else do I got down here? This is one that I've actually really started liking, and I'm gonna use it for a lot of different things. It's a 7-foot Rave medium. Now, like my Alabama rig rod, like I was talking about, these Raves have a slightly more moderate taper. Perfect for a topwater. You can see I have it set up with braid too. So the reason for that is I'll fish my topwaters on braid. I don't think they can really see the line, and really they kind of react a little, or you can fish them fast enough to kind of fish through. Every once in a while I'll put mono, 15-pound mono leader on there, but usually I'll just leave braid. But perfect for topwater, but also say I get like a little grass bed or something and I'm not enjoying trying to rip a trap, even on 20, 15-pound fluorocarbon, it's just not working, and I want to get that trap into the grass and out. I run 30-pound braid on here. I can throw a little trap on here and rip grass like there's no tomorrow. Ripping grass with braid is great. You're gonna get less bites unless that water is tingy, most of the time, not all the time, but it just gives you a little better ability to clear that bait when you're fishing that grass. So it's super versatile. I can also throw a little swim jig on here, something along those lines. Once again, the braided line and that moderate kind of tip, perfect setup for those kind of baits. So let's see, what else do we got down here? I guess lastly, or second to lastly, we'll pull out this guy. This is another Halo TI. And this is one of the few plastic rods that I have that's probably gonna see quite a bit of action this winter. I love throwing a swim bait on this thing. It's a 7'3" medium heavy, extra fast tip, so super duper sensitive. But as you can see, I have my absolutely beloved ball head jig on here. That will be getting some action on Pickwick and Wilson Dam for the smallmouth. Hopefully too on Tim's Ford Lake, we're gonna go up there. But that's something I will throw during the winter as a drag bait. I'll also put maybe even a football jig on here. This is really the rod that I'm always gonna have a jig tied onto, or some kind of jig style bait, football. Even if I'm pitching a little bit of shallow wood with like a Ned style jig, like a heavier one. If I need a little more heavy line and a little heavier rod, this is my go-to, 7'3" medium. Super duper sensitive, but it is a little bit longer, so I get a little bit of play in the tip. But one of my favorite rods for dragging, dude. Like, if you're gonna drag during the winter and going into spring, this is my guy. And then we're gonna wrap it up with something simple, and one of my favorite rigs is actually on it. And as we go into spring, you're gonna be seeing a lot of this. It's a wacky rig. And I actually have a little Nico kind of weight in there right now because I was trying to get it a little bit deeper. But this is a Daylight. It's a 7-foot, I think it's 7'3" or 7'2". I want to say it's a 7'3" medium. So this is my drop shot rig rod, my wacky rig rod, my skip a weightless stick bait under the dock rod, my do just about anything with like a small plastic kind of deal. It's a perfect kind of finesse style. Like my TI with my Ned rig on it, I'll have 14-pound braid to an 8-pound leader. Just a perfect setup. This has a little more moderate tip than my TI, which I actually enjoy for a drop shotting because then I'm not imparting too much action onto the bait. And also I've found, especially with these spotted bass, like yes, they'll dart and hit stuff, but a lot of times when you're drop shotting, they just grab it and hold on to it. And if you don't keep pressure on them, they drop it. So this rod allows the rod to load up, and I'm terrible about telling when I got a bite. So it allows the rod to load up, keep a little pressure on those fish, so I can just reel down and set the hook, dude. It's a perfect setup for me for drop shotting and those kinds of styles of baits because I don't pick up on bites very well. It's more a question of whether I see the line jump or if that rod loads up, and this rod does exactly that. So that's a wrap on our rod arsenal going into the cold water and winter months. Let me know if there's something that you use that's absolutely like integral, like a setup and action, whatever. And as you guys can tell, I'm still working on figuring out what reels. I've been a little poor lately, so I've kind of been scrimping on the reels, but I do need to pick up some new reels. I was actually thinking about maybe doing like a little Daiwa versus Shimano deal, but stay tuned for that. Hopefully we'll be doing that in the next month or so. But if you guys got any questions, or if you want to know more about the stuff that we talked about in the videos, I'll put links to it down at Tackle Warehouse in the description box below. But thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for supporting the channel. We're going to wrap this thing up. Tight lines.